In the heart of the Mkuzu Nature Reserve in South Africa, a relentless drought had been raging for 7 months. The once lush savanna had turned into a mosaic of cracked earth and fragile sun-scorched grass. Rivers had dried up to thin streams, and the animals that once thrived here had either migrated or fallen victim to the harsh conditions. In the midst of this desert landscape, a mother elephant named Namsha and her young calf Londu remained in their familiar territory, guided by instinct and a deep attachment to this land. Namsha was a majestic matriarch, her worn tusks bearing witness to years of survival in the wild. Her calf Londu, barely 6 months old, was small and fragile, his tiny body struggling to cope with the hardships of drought. The watering hole near their usual grazing grounds had turned into a pit of dry, cracked mud, and the acacia trees that once provided shade and food stood bare. By the 6th month, the heat had become unbearable, with midday temperatures soaring to 42 Celsius, turning the air into a shimmering haze. Nams, sensing the urgency, gently nudged Londu with her trunk, urging him to move. The pair set off on an exhausting 60-kilometer journey to a distant valley where, according to rumors, there were still pockets of greenery and a small stream fed by an underground spring. The journey began at sunset, when the fading light provided a brief respite from the scorching sun. The evening air was heavy, and the light mist clinging to the ground did little to quench Lundu's growing thirst. Namsi's huge feet kicked up clouds of dust with every step, her eyes scanning the horizon intently for the slightest sign of life. The first day of the journey was difficult. Nams led Lundu across a scorched plain where sparse thorny bushes were the only hint of vegetation. Lundu, weakened by hunger, trailed behind, his little legs trembling with fatigue. Namsa stopped every now and then, turning back to check if her calf was keeping up. At times she encouraged him with a soft grunt, as if reminding him that they had to keep going. By nightfall, they came across a small puddle covered with a crust of mud. Nams dug into it with her trunk, trying to get at least a little water, but the liquid was murky and barely enough to moisten Lundu's parched lips. On the second day, the sun rose mercilessly, and the heat intensified. Lundu began to move more slowly. His breathing was heavy, and his skin, usually smooth, was covered with cracks from dehydration. Nams, despite her own fatigue, remained unyielding. She found rare dry branches that Lundu tried to chew, but they barely satisfied his hunger. By noon, Lundu stumbled and fell, his small body collapsing onto the scorching ground. Namsa let out a low, drawn-out roar full of despair and began pushing him with her trunk, trying to lift him up. After several agonizing minutes, Lundu gathered his last strength, stood up, and continued on his way, clinging to his mother. On the 3rd day of their journey, when the horizon already seemed like an endless haze, Namsa caught a faint smell of moisture. She quickened her pace, encouraging Lundu, who could barely stand on his feet. By evening, they reached a small valley, where a stream glistened among the sparse trees, surrounded by patches of green grass. Namsa made a joyful sound and led Lundu to the water. But a few meters from the stream, Lundu fell again, his strength exhausted. He lay motionless, his breathing weak, and his eyes half closed. Nams, in a panic, circled him, touching him with her trunk and making deep, mournful sounds, as if begging him to hold on. Night fell on the valley, and Nams stayed by Lundu's side, guarding him. She stood like a sentinel, her massive form casting a shadow over the small calf. The stars shone over the savanna, but hope seemed distant. Lundu's breathing grew weaker, teetering on the brink of life and death. The next morning, a ranger named Sibo, who was patrolling the reserve, went on his usual check of the territory. He knew Namsu and Lundu, as they often appeared in his area of responsibility. Not finding them in their usual place, Sibo became concerned. The drought this year was particularly severe, and he knew that many animals had suffered. He contacted the base by radio, reported that the elephants were missing, and organized a search party. The rangers split into several teams, each of which surveyed possible routes. After 4 hours of searching, Sibo noticed tracks, large footprints belonging to Nams, and small uneven footprints belonging to Lundu, leading to the valley. Sibo's heart pounded with a mixture of hope and fear. He hurried along the tracks, praying to find them alive. When he reached the stream, Sibo saw a heartbreaking scene. Namsa stood over the motionless Lundu's, her eyes full of anxiety, and her trunk twitching nervously. She turned to Sibo, her ears pricked up, ready to defend her calf. Sibo slowly raised his hands, saying in a soft voice, "It's okay, Nams, I'm here to help." His calm tone seemed to reassure her a little, although she continued to watch his every move warily. Sibo cautiously approached Lundu, assessing his condition. The baby's body was emaciated, his skin cracked, and his breathing barely audible. He called for backup on his radio, asking for water and a veterinary kit. While his colleagues were on their way, Sibo took a bottle of water and a syringe with a nutrient solution used for weakened animals out of his backpack. He slowly approached Lundu, trying not to provoke Noms. She took a step back but continued to watch, ready to pounce if anything went wrong. Sibo gently lifted Lundu's head, pouring water into his parched mouth. Then he administered the solution, hoping it would give the baby strength. The sun beat down mercilessly, but Sibo did not stop, fanning Lundu with his hat and sprinkling him with water to cool him down. Noms, standing nearby, tilted her head, sniffing her calf, her anxiety palpable. An hour later, Lundu began to show signs of life. His eyelids fluttered, and he moved slightly. Sibo, holding back his joy, continued to speak to him in a soft voice. "Come on, baby, you can do it." Noms made a low, vibrating sound, as if encouraging Lundu. Half an hour later, Lundu tried to stand up. Sibo supported him, helping him to keep his balance. Noms, as if sensing the change, gently touched Lundu with her trunk, her movements becoming softer. By the time the reinforcements arrived, Lundu was already standing, unsteadily but firmly. The rangers brought more water and nutrient solutions, and contacted a veterinarian to examine the baby later. Noms, satisfied that Lundu was safe, began to drink from the stream, her huge body trembling with relief. Lundu, still weak, took a few steps toward the water and began to drink, pressing close to his mother. Sibo and his team backed away, giving the elephants space. He watched them from a distance, his heart overflowing with pride. Namsha turned to him, her eyes seeming to express gratitude. Lundu took a deep breath, took an uncertain step toward the grass, and began to nibble on it, satisfying his hunger for the first time in days. The next day, dark clouds covered the sky, heralding the long-awaited rain. Sibo smiled when he heard the forecast, thinking of Noms and Lundu. The rain could fill the streams and revive the savanna, giving the elephants a chance to recover. He returned to the valley to check on them. Noms and Lundu had moved a little further away, into the shade of the trees, where the grass was thicker. Sibo did not disturb them, but noted that their tracks looked more confident. A few days later, the rains finally came. The streams filled with water, and the savanna began to come back to life, covered with green shoots. Noms and Lundu, having survived their ordeal, could now feed and regain their strength. The drought was not over yet, but this rain gave them a respite. Sibo continued to patrol, watching over their recovery, and every time he saw their tracks, he felt that his efforts had not been in vain. The story of Nomsi and Lundu became legendary among the Mkuzu Rangers. It reminded everyone of the fragility of nature and the importance of protecting its inhabitants. As Sibo returned to base, he thought about the future of elephants and how humanity could help preserve this amazing world. Despite all the difficulties, the Mkuzu Nature Reserve remained home to many animals, and the story of Nomsi and Lundu became a symbol of hope and resilience. The rains brought life back to the savanna, and the grass turned green, as if promising a better future. Lundu, whose steps were becoming more confident, walked alongside Nomsi, leaving footprints in the wet earth. Their story, full of struggle and salvation, is forever etched in the memory of the reserve, a testament to the unbreakable bond between humans and nature, where compassion and determination can change destiny. Friends, thank you for taking the time to read this story. Don't forget to like and subscribe to support us, and learn more heartwarming stories like this one.